Less than 1 square kilometer of land, blown apart by more than 500 mine explosions in 4 horrific years of endless combat. This is Vauquois. Located in northeastern France, 250 kilometers from Paris, and dating back to at least the early medieval period, Vauquois by 1913 was a quiet agricultural village known mostly for its natural spring, considered sacred by the pilgrims who visited each year. But this sleepy town of only 170 inhabitants would soon become one of the worst killing fields of the First World War. But what makes the 4 bloody years of battle at Vauquois stand out is not its trench warfare, or street fighting, or even that 15,000 men lost their lives there, but that this remote village became the center of the war's turn toward tunnel warfare in the darkest depths of the earth. There is nothing now left of the French village of Vauquois. In its place today there is now just a desolate lunar landscape. In fact, there are now 2 hills instead of 1, the main street having been obliterated by a series of enormous mine craters that divides the hill in half. Here's how a French soldier described the impact of war on the village of Vauquois in late June 1916. The view towards the east was hidden by a slight decline. I was at one side of this and was told that was Vauquois. I looked. I was dazed. I knew that there was nothing left of Vauquois, but I did not expect to see this. Dominating the surroundings, looking like a smooth, whitened rump, a skull, an egg. If someone could give an example of similar devastation somewhere else, then I'd like to know. There was once a village and trees here. Now it's fantastic, just a crater. On the southwest side, near the top, a huge crater is visible. It's said that it's about 120 meters wide and about 30 to 60 meters deep. The base of the hill is sparsely covered with some vegetation. Only the summit presents an incredible and chaotic spectacle. What this average soldier witnessed that day was the result of more than a year of tunneling and mine explosions as the Germans and French fought their way through the middle of the mountain. For a total of 4 years, they would eat, sleep, fight, and live in the tunnels, all the while digging a labyrinth of pathways and chambers with the sole aim of blowing each other to pieces. The result? Destruction on an unimaginable scale. Because of its geography, Vauquois was an important strategic spot for the warring armies, one of the few high points of land in a valley region known as the Meuse-Argonne. The hill of Vauquois was a key position through which 2 valleys and a vital railway line could be controlled. As one French Army bulletin noted in February 1915, Vauquois is a great observation point. From it, the enemy can direct its long-range artillery fire on the villages, supply routes, and troop movements in the valley. And so the capture of Vauquois was of the highest importance for us, but it was also clear that it was going to take a great effort. In effect, the position had become a veritable fortress. The cellars in the village, hewed from solid rock, offered the enemy a shelter from the effects of our field artillery. On September 4th, the German Fifth Army occupied the village of Vauquois briefly. The hill was about 290 meters high at its peak, and it ran in a generally east-west direction, and the Germans settled in along the gentler northern approach. The French army counterattacked, struggling up the steep southern slopes. During the month of September, the butte changed hands several times, but the French 82nd Infantry Regiment was not able to hold on to the hill. After recapturing the butte, the Germans fortified their position on September 24, 1914, turning it into a stronghold. The French would try numerous times in the ensuing 6 months to regain the hill. The stone houses and church were reduced to ruins that the German engineers adapted into bunkers and machine gun posts. Cement and steel were brought up from the rear to make them solid and resistant to French attacks. They built trenches on the southern flank of the hill, and the firepower at the defenders' disposal was simply unbeatable. The French attacks up the slope of the butte by companies of the 46th Infantry Regiment on the 28th and 29th of October were carried out with little or no artillery support. The French 75mm guns were unable to lob shells over the steep slope to reach their targets on the other side. Our men keep advancing like on maneuver, but suddenly there is a huge noise, followed by a whistling. There is an explosion, then others, and on the slopes great black clouds. These are the heavy German shells that fall exactly on the position occupied by our men. Groups of men are struck and quickly wiped out. Some men want to escape, but one after another they are picked off by shells or by the machine guns, which in front and on the flank greet them. Everything quiets. Through the trees, I make out bodies stretched out. A few hundred litter the open field. They sleep their last sleep, still looking at the enemy. In December 1914, further French assaults also failed. Thousands of German and French soldiers died as each side tried to control the hill. On a single day of the 17th of February 1915, more than 1,000 soldiers died on the hill of Vauquois. As one French historian noted, it has been estimated that in the first 6 months of battle, 8,000 French and 6,300 Germans died. So you see, on a small area 100 meters wide, it is enormous, unthinkable. Soldier André Pizard described the hill as a museum of horrors. The corpses which served as cover for the shooters the morning of March 2nd, and which we recovered bit by bit from stones and earth, decompose under the parapets. They are poisoning the air. And as another soldier recalled, I've just been through terrible days. We attacked and took a good position, but due to the deaths and injuries, we had to march on the corpses and listen to the cries of suffering of all the wounded. We ask ourselves how we can pass through them, but I was not too frightened, as we were all determined. And how many times we escaped death, we have no idea. Going back into the lines on April 23, 1915, French soldier Pizard described the position he left just a fortnight before. Our artillerymen have demolished the last wall of the church, and the Boche have mowed down with their machine guns the great tree of Vauquois, which still raised its black carcass. The church and its chestnut tree, which had survived much of the initial fighting, had become symbols of Vauquois and its destruction, and the turn toward a new kind of warfare. As the French soldier Boucheron recounted, we were not going to be able to find the streets. The blocks of houses have disappeared. The village appears to us like a field that has been tilled by an immense plow. I distinctly see the tree, black, with no branches or leaves, against the sky. There is no trace of the church. Everything is razed to the ground. There is no more village. Blind as a bat, I don't see anything but the blackness of the trampled earth, and in some places, a little snow. We file through the middle of the village, or better to say, the place that was the village. Sergeant Gaston Dupré added, "How expensive it is, this corner of French land, and what price must be paid to retake it from the invaders. Those that have made this effort, the decimated, exhaust themselves." The village was reduced to rubble, and the gardens and woodlands surrounding it were now just one of the thousands of killing fields of the Western Front. As the above-ground battle turned into a bloody stalemate, both sides went directly into the earth. The armies, seeking refuge from artillery and stalemated in the bloody surface war, began tunneling toward each other's lines, in the process blowing a total of no less than 539 mines underneath the spot where the quiet village once stood. But what was the War of the Mines like for those who lived and fought there through those long grinding years? The trench fighting continued along with the mine war that followed. In fact, underground mines were often detonated as a prelude to an infantry attack on the surface. Since opposing trenches were so close that artillery support was impractical, small mortars lobbed shells into opposing trenches as a mine went off below. They kept the defenders' heads down for a few vital seconds as the infantry made slow progress through the barbed wire entanglements. The tunnel systems at Vauquois soon increased in complexity as each side tried to outdo the other. Listening tunnels were dug to intercept the enemy's approaching diggers. Storerooms, antechambers, throughways, command centers, and multiple entrances and exits were created. The resulting labyrinths could support about 1,000 men on either side, each racing to annihilate the enemy first. The tunnels became an underground city where men slept, worked, ate, fought, and sometimes died. The tunnels were equipped with kitchens and sleeping quarters and could house hundreds of men for weeks on end. Of the two sides, the German redoubts were better supplied and defended. They had 2 generator rooms to supply light for the tunnelers. One was running for 12 hours while the other was maintained, and vice versa. As the war went on, the commanders on both sides began studying new and more radical solutions. They began digging deeper than ever before in a race to the lowest part of the hill. In seeking to blow such a hole in the enemy's line that the following attack would meet little to no resistance, they designed bigger and bigger explosions. Eventually, their goal became to raise all 120 meters of the hill to ground level. If neither side could have it, then no one would. It became a deadly game of cat and mouse. On the 23rd of March 1916, French engineers placed a 12-ton mine under the German positions where the church had been. The German listening service did not hear the preparations, and the mine killed 50 German troops. The infantry attack that followed, however, was still repulsed by the well-entrenched Germans who fell back to the second line. In retaliation, the Germans decided to blow a massive charge on the western side of the hill. They used their favorite explosive, a compound of ammonium nitrate and resin known as westphalite. The result was a crater that ripped the hill apart. They followed this on the 14th of May 1916 by igniting 60 tons of westphalite, the largest charge ever used in the War of the Mines. It blew up the entire west side of the hill. This time it was the French listening service who failed to hear the tunneling or alert their colleagues to prepare a countermine. The explosion blew the French lines apart, killing 109 French infantrymen and leaving behind a massive crater. On the surface, the commanders had, by 1917, come to a gentleman's agreement. There would be no explosions after 7 a.m., and mortars and grenades would be launched only after 5 p.m. In one incident during Christmas of 1916, German and French miners sang to each other through the rock partition that divided them. Another time, a French soldier, patrolling less than 30 meters from the German sector, met a German soldier who offered to trade supplies. As the French soldier recalled, "There was one who proposed exchanging chocolate for cigars. He said to me, 'Say, misters, you all give chocolate, I will give cigars.' I told him that I did not have any chocolate. In truth, I didn't have any, and if I had, I wouldn't have hesitated to trade. Chocolate is not what we were missing." All this to say that they were not too dangerous. One New Year's Eve, most likely 1917, both sides celebrated. As one soldier recalled, "At midnight in the surrounding villages, every bell in the churches rang out. To the surprise of the men stationed in Vauquois, at this ringing, the village bell joined in, despite being buried for quite some time. This moving music touched the hearts of the men in the trenches and paralyzed them. For far too long they had not heard the clarion of peaceful times of their church. See how it descends now, from the butte towards the valley, calling friends and enemies to greet the new year. Some pioneers had cleared the rubble from the forgotten debris-covered bell, hung it on a chain, and let it ring one last time." The peace of the surface, though, belied the potential destruction laying just below. By early 1917, the French commander began to dig the deepest mines of the whole campaign, as deep as 40 meters under the earth, with the goal of employing 140 tons of explosives to simply blow the remaining hill to pieces. The Germans, too, were digging, and in the relative safety of their concrete bunkers, their plan was to go even deeper. 3 100-meter shafts began inching their way to the bowels of the earth. They planned to use 840 tons of westphalite, but it wasn't to be. German commanders deemed that the explosives were needed elsewhere. The Germans continued digging until March of 1918, when they at last abandoned their plan to totally destroy the hill. The The French also realized they would never have the manpower to dig so deep. A mutiny in the French army had reduced its numbers, and by then the strategic effectiveness of holding Vauquois had disappeared. By the end of 1917, Italian troops sent to replace the French at Vauquois were ordered to blow up the entrances to the tunnels and retreat. The Germans left behind only a garrison of 100 men. By the spring of 1918, with the Americans now fully engaged in the war, artillery again returned to barrage the hill of Vauquois. Commanded by future President Harry Truman, then an officer in the National Guard of Missouri, the assault was the prelude to a massive American attack as a part of the Meuse-Argonne offensive. The American 35th Division seized the mound on September 26, 1918, after a brief, fierce battle with the small remaining garrison of German Imperial Guard. Though the 35th Division succeeded in taking Vauquois with few casualties, they went on to many battles as part of the Meuse-Argonne offensive, suffering heavy losses. The men who survived the 4 years of fighting at Vauquois had endured the horrors of modern warfare. Trapped between the firepower of terrifying weapons above ground and massive mines in the earth below. To this day, only a few of the Vauquois tunnels have been reopened. There are still 1,000 men buried under the hill of Vauquois and much unexploded ordnance in the mines. The pitted surface of the scarred earth where the village of Vauquois once stood masks an underground labyrinth of nearly 25 miles of tunnels on multiple levels. The ruined moonscape of the terrain has become what the author Jules Romain referred to as a heap of ruins stuffed with dead men's bones.